So today's episode it's tough. That trigger warning for anyone dealing with grief. It's hard stuff, but it's also so beautiful. The way that Jason shares his grief, shares his story of his son's death and his role in caring for his son. For sure, anyone who's dealing with grief, there's some beautiful content here, but also just something on the masculine spirit, opening up, being gentle, feeling emotions and walking through this. It's a beautiful thing.
The vulnerability for this man was real, and listening to his full story in details of everything that he has been through with these two children, and then the death of his son is heartbreaking, obviously. But he shines a little glimmer of hope, and he talks about working with his community, creating a Facebook group, and he talks a lot about journaling, which is one of our tools that we talk about all the time. But he found that incredibly helpful for his journey and healing.
Yeah, sharing his grief with his community and journaling. And the first year, I think he said of the journaling, it was journaling for himself. It wasn't for sharing. But once he got to a point where he wanted to share it, then the help that he could do, where people reached out to say thank you for this. So it's a beautiful episode. So grateful to Jason for his bravery and his openness to share it.
Very inspiring. Everyone, make sure you listen in.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We're always so happy that you join us. It's great to be here. And today we are speaking with Jason Tuttle. He's a married father of two kids with multiple cognitive and physical disabilities, some rare. He was a stay-at-home dad and a medical caregiver for 12 years until his son suddenly and unexpectedly passed away from issues related to his needs on January 28th, 2022. Since the day his son passed, he decided he was going to rise from the utter devastation to create a website, a Facebook blog, and a community called Letters to Zachary on grief, and it details his raw, unfiltered, and open grief journey from a father's perspective. Letters to Zachary is a place where men can feel vulnerable enough to share their emotion, empowers women to help the grieving men in their lives, and to see that it's okay to be vulnerable through his example. Jason's community is open to all grievers, and we're so grateful that you're joining us today, Jason. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Wow. I kind of don't even know where to start with this one. I'm feeling humbled actually to have this conversation with you, and your willingness to be vulnerable. It's a stretch. It feels like this day and age when we're finding men who are willing to go to that place, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing so much harshness in the world right now. So part of me is super excited to have this conversation with you to get your male perspective on this particular subject, which is grief. And part of me feels sad for knowing what you're going through and being willing to stand up here and have this conversation with us. So without any more of my nonsense, Jason, just give us a little background on your kids and what you've been doing and to raise these kids.
So, I'm a married father. I've been married. This year will be 23 years, if my math is right, to my wife. When we got married, we were older in the sense that we were in our later 20s versus our younger 20s. And then my wife is almost 3 years older than me. So when we got married and we decided that, we were going to do that, the running joke was now that we're married, I want to have X number of kids by this age. And
Hmm.
so we had a year honeymoon and then we went right into trying, and it didn't take us long to have a child. I'll never forget the day because we were living in a different place, and my wife came home and we had found out that she was pregnant, and she goes, "What happens if we have a child with medical needs?" And I said, "Well, I said, I'm not a believer in what someone considered alternative birth control methods. So if it happens, it happens. We'll deal with it as it comes."
Hmm.
And as luck would have it, if we're someone who has a faith system, apparently God obliged, because within the first 5 years of our marriage, we had two kids with a whole host of medical issues, most of which were identical, even though my kids were born 2 years apart almost to the day. So, but for my son, we didn't know that there's going to be any issues up until about the week 20 appointment, which for any woman that's gotten pregnant, that's the appointment where you find out the sex of the child, and that's past the first trimester. And so you're kind
Hmm.
of smooth sailing, if you will, after that point almost. And it was at that appointment that the ultrasound tech goes, "I found an issue. I need to know the sex of the child." Because before that, I wanted to know, my wife did not, because I'm a planner. I was making the nursery. I didn't want to do in muted tones, that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
wanted to cater it to whatever the sex of the child was. And, my wife was of the, well, this is life's last great surprise. And when we found out there was an issue, we said, "Well, can you tell us what the issue is?" And she said, "Unfortunately, that's kind of a doctor relayed message." Okay,
Hmm.
fine. I said, "Well, why did you need to know the sex of the child?" And they said, "Well, if it's what I think it is, it's rare in boys, but even rarer in girls." So
Yes.
we went, "Okay, so what's our next step?" And then it was at that point we started seeing a perinatalogist, which is essentially a high risk OBGYN. And we started seeing just a whole slew of different doctors up until my wife gave birth. And that's kind of how everything started for life with us.
Wow. So this was not something that happened after your child was born and you're going, oh boy, now what are we going to do? So you had mentally, you had time to prepare for this.
Um, a little bit.
Yeah.
The other kind of ironic thing is, before my son was born, my father got really big into like ancestry.com and was
Mm.
doing our family trees and all that. And he had gone back like 10 generations. There were no issues that we could find in 10 generations of my family. Now,
Wow.
Oh.
granted, after a certain point, it was kind of almost taboo to say, "Well, I have a child that's got this medical condition." But as far
Hmm.
back as we could find, there was nothing. And even on my wife's side, they went back 5 generations and there was nothing, nothing
Wow.
that
Right.
wasn't
Wow.
self-induced, if you will, like an
Yeah.
alcoholism or something
Yeah.
to that effect.
Yeah.
So
So
it blindsided us.
what was the
Yeah.
diagnosis then? Or is it the
Um,
same for both of your children?
Well, to give you a rundown, and the easiest way I can explain it is both of my kids have severe neurological delays, meaning my daughter, even though she's 17, she functions about 6 to 8 years old.
Mm.
They both had epilepsy, meaning there's 6 different kinds of seizures. I've seen 4 of them in my house. Um,
Mm.
both of them were nonverbal,
Mm.
because they had areas of missing white matter in their brain, which we believe were in the areas that affected speech. Um,
Hmm.
Mm.
they could both walk with assistance, but like to walk on their own, no, they could not. So they both had wheelchairs and were wheelchair bound in a sense,
Wow.
because like I could walk with them, but could we do long distances? No.
Wow.
Right.
My son was born with a rare condition on top of all of that called Eagle Barrett syndrome. And the easiest way to explain it is there's kind of two major components to it. Um, Eagle Barrett syndrome is essentially he was born without any core abdominal muscle. He had no abs, no front, no sides, no bottom, no top. So he had
Wow.
no core abdominal muscle. Um, he also, because of the condition, had an abnormally large bladder that didn't get the sensation to go to the bathroom, which meant I had to give him a catheter every 4 hours just so that he could go to the bathroom. Because if I didn't, it would continually back up to the point
Oh
that it
my
would become a
goodness.
medical issue, like
Mhm.
hospitalization almost. Um,
Wow.
because he didn't have the core abdominal muscle, one of the issues that we came across was his lungs formed normally, but they were a smaller version of, say, what you and I have. So when he would get the pneumonias, the bronchitises, that kind of
Mm.
thing, whereas we have the muscle to build pressure on to cough the crud out, he did not have.
Yeah. The
Oh yeah.
So if I didn't catch it fast enough in the house with the machinery that I eventually got through as a pulmonologist, I knew I was taken to the hospital. I knew I was getting admitted. I knew I was going to the ICU every time we went there. And the
Mm.
first 5 years of his life, we were in the hospital every 6 months.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
And so did you have some help at home? This like either you didn't sleep or like I don't know I don't know how you managed all of it when both of them
Um,
are,
Right.
in wheelchairs and like
so it was always decided that I was going to be the one to stay at home. One, I was physically strong enough to carry him should the
yes.
need be. I learned all the physical medical procedures, so that made it easier for me to stay at home. Plus,
Hmm.
when we got to the point of having I was the one that always took my son. I got admitted with him, I stayed with him, I got discharged with him. So I was always his voice in the hospital for when doctors came in, I could say, it got to a point where, like, one of the last times he was in the hospital, I had a nurse literally go, "You are the most informed parent I've ever come across." And I said, "Well, he can't talk. And so I have to have 15 years worth of medical knowledge in the back of my head. And the more I can
The
give
truth.
you, the better decision you can make because you know what his history is."
Yeah.
So I
This
was,
is absolutely the definition of a warrior parent. And
Mm,
it's not something we necessarily choose, but it's something
Mhm,
that when it's your kid, you rise
mhm,
to the occasion.
sure.
And it is challenging, it's hard, it's difficult, but there's always there's just as the parent, it's like it's no choice really. It's like
Yeah.
this is what you do for your child.
Certainly. And that's not to say that there wasn't a lot of trial and error.
Oh
That's not
yeah,
to say that there wasn't a lot of frustration
of
because
course.
up until about year 5, I still had things coming out that was surprising me.
Yeah.
Like with his Barrett syndrome, I knew about the urological stuff, but what I didn't realize was his respiratory hospital stays, which was the majority of his hospital stays, were a byproduct of his condition that I had no
Mm,
idea was coming. And
hmm.
so that was an issue. And then when he developed seizures, that really threw me off for a while because they were so random when they happened. I never could figure out a trigger for them. They just
yeah.
Mm,
happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You're always
yeah,
trying to
it was
figure
a
out,
lot
well,
of
what did I
trouble.
do? What did he eat?
Yeah.
Like I used to have
yeah.
a
What can I
dog
avoid?
actually that had seizures, and we were always like, oh my God, was it the food? Was it some shots? Like, was it the grass? Like you're
Yeah.
always like thinking, what did I do wrong? What can I do different? How can I be better? Like 24/7, right?
Hmm.
So ultimately, uh, this disease, I guess, was it pneumonia that finally caught up to him with his lungs, or what happened to Zachary?
So what as it relates to his passing?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, 3 days prior to him passing, he came home. He was perfectly normal, ate like a horse, even though his size didn't show it, because we
Mm,
always had trouble keeping weight on him for whatever
Yeah.
reason. But that evening, he threw up a little bit, which didn't really surprise me because, like, at the time, my wife was like brushing his teeth. And so I looked at my wife and said, "Hey, maybe you just went a little too far back, his gag reflex, and
hmm.
whatever was there just came up."
Hmm.
So my son was always, from day one, from the day we brought him home from the hospital, he was always an excellent sleeper. I never had issues
Mm,
with him. And, the running joke was, well, I've got all this other issues. God's got to give me something. And
yeah.
so he was always a really good sleeper. Well, that night he was up and down literally all night, which was very unusual for him.
Mm,
So that morning, I was a stay-at-home parent at that point, and like I texted his teacher, said, I think he's coming down with a 24-hour virus. I'm gonna keep him home. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's contagious. I'll let you know. And so they were really good about that. And so that next day, he refused to eat, refused to drink. And even
mm,
that day, I looked at my wife and said, it doesn't really surprise me right now because, like, when my wife and I are sick, we don't really want to eat anyways.
right,
And
right,
so I looked at her and said, if this starts happening tomorrow, that's when it becomes an issue because this could pass today for what it could be a bug
right,
and it could be
right.
okay tomorrow. Well, that evening we put him to bed the same time as his sister because they had different bedtimes. He went to bed a little bit later. We put him to bed at that point and he got quiet. I figured he was tired because at that point he had probably been up for 30 something hours at that point with
Mm-hmm.
not taking a nap, not going, nothing. So we didn't think much about it. We got my daughter up on the way to school, and then I went to go in to get my son up at like when I would get him up on the weekends. And usually, what would happen would be I would walk into his room, and he would start getting excited and bouncing and clapping his hands and just
Mm,
just happy to see everybody. Well, I walked into here, and he was kind of awake, and he didn't look at me. It was like he looked through me, and that kind of threw me
mm,
off. And so I came into his room and he's got kind of a hospital bed style bed in his room. And I came to his right side and I noticed he had a dark green streak of fluid coming out of his mouth,
Oh.
which the only thing dark green in your body's bile.
Mhm.
And so I
mm,
immediately recognized and looked at my wife and said, why is bile coming out of his mouth? This is not good. So I pick him up. He's kind of floppy, like he can't hold himself up. And even that, as crazy as it sounds, didn't really strike me because I'd had an episode. I'd had a hospital stay in the past where he got really sick and he was that way. And so I went, something's not right. I need to kind of go through my medical checklist in my head. So I take him out in the living room. I go through my whole checklist. He's still not, something's still wrong. And it was honestly just a hunch. And I looked at my wife and said, I'm getting him dressed. I'm taking him to the hospital. Something is not right. And I said,
Mhm.
something's really not right. And I don't know what it is.
mm.
So I load him up in his chair. I get him in my van and understand I live on the southwest side of Atlanta. The children's hospital closest to me is 60 miles north of me.
Oh.
And which in Atlanta, for Atlanta, that's nothing. Like I've driven there so many times that like I could
Right.
close my eyes and drive there. So I get on the interstate and I'm doing 100 miles an hour going up there. And I get to the hospital, I park in the parking deck and I go to get him out and he's really floppy. And this catches my attention. So I put him in his wheelchair. I go up into the ER and I skip the line because I know something's really not wrong. And a security guard comes up to me as if to almost yell at me to say, well, you need to get in line. And I literally look at him and go, he's not breathing. I need immediate help. And so he looks at the nurse. He kind of almost snaps his fingers at the nurse. The nurse comes over. Now, understand, I've been in this hospital 100 times.
Yeah.
This nurse says, follow me. And we literally go at a full run to one of the trauma rooms, like as fast as we can get there.
Mhm.
So we get in there. I instinctively put him on the table and I back away and hope that they'll let me stay in there because he's nonverbal. He can't tell me
Yeah.
anything. And so luckily there's another trauma room that's open that's not used. And I back off in there and they let me stay in there.
Mm-hmm.
So they immediately cut his clothes off of him. They immediately intubate him. They put a tube to get air into his lungs. The one thing that struck me was they immediately take like this drill and they drill a port into his knee, like into bone,
Mm.
like no pain meds, nothing. And they do that and they like attach a port to him. And I look at the monitor and my son doesn't even react. And my thought was, if I would have been on that table and they would have drilled into the bone of my knee, I would have come off that table. I said,
Yeah.
and so in my head, I went, something's really not right.
Yeah.
So the head ER doc comes over to me and goes, how long has he been this way down to the minute? And I say, well, he's been this way X number of minutes. she goes over and barks orders, and then she comes back to me and goes, explain to me what was the scenario as to why you brought him up here. And so I tell her
Mhm.
everything. She goes off and barks orders. Well, no more than she does that, they start doing CPR, and they do this for probably 3 or 4 minutes at that point. And I see him get the paddles out, and they put the paddles on him, and just like a hospital drama, I hear him yell, "Clear!" They hit that button, and he raises off the table. And I instinctively look at the monitor because I'm so used to looking from all of his hospital stays, and it barely changes. Now, even though it doesn't register in my brain I go, he's not coming back. But it doesn't fully register like emotionally, it just
Yeah.
he's not coming back. I'm so compartmentalized because I'm trying to figure out what's going
Yes.
on and what everybody's doing. And so
Yeah.
they work on him for a continuous hour. It kind of surprised me how long they worked on him. Through overtime, they continue CPR the whole time, and they probably shock him probably 5 times total. And so finally, she comes over, the head ER doc comes over to me and goes, "Well, I can shock him again." But she said, "Unfortunately, I think the result's going to be the same."
Mhm.
And, I go, "This is out of my wheelhouse. Do what you think is medically necessary." And so I think they do it again. And then she comes over and pronounces them. So I walk off into the other room. I literally have a moment for probably 20 seconds. I immediately cleared up, and because I know I have to call my wife, because my wife at this point thinks we're doing the standard. She's thinking I'm getting
Yeah.
admitted. We're here
Yep.
for our 7 to 10 day stay. I'm calling to tell her we're in room X number room. I have to tell her that the last time she saw him was the last time she saw him alive, and he's dead on a table. And so I tell her that. I'll never forget her response. It is burned into my brain forever. Just the guttural sound she made when she found that out. Now, I understand at this point she was working from home. And like I tell people all the time, I said my next statement to her wasn't trying to be controlling. I just knew what state of mind she was in. And so I went, message your boss, leave work, call your parents, have them drive you up here. I'm in this room. I'll talk to
Yeah.
you in an hour. Because
Mhm.
I knew if I didn't do that, it
Yeah.
wouldn't come across to her. And that's exactly what she did. And so I then
Yeah.
called my mother and told her everything that was going on. And then I literally sat in that trauma room for an hour with my son, who had
Mhm.
literally just died before my eyes, waiting for my family to come up there. And, you know, it's still not hitting me at this point.
Yeah.
Like I tell
So,
people all the time,
so
the
it's been
one,
four years. Is that right?
uh,
4 years.
yes,
Yeah.
actually, tomorrow is exactly 4 years.
Oh. Oh my goodness.
So, like I tell people all the time, I said one of the things that I remember most from that day before the family got there was it's going to be weird to remember this. I said, but how quickly he got cold. I don't know why I
Mhm.
remember that, but like
Yeah.
I went to go grab his hands and it just stunned me. I went, wow, he's ice cold and it's been
Mhm.
10 minutes
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing. So, but
So,
yeah,
so you say that, so you're faith-based,
yes.
father, right? So the understanding, I've worked in medicine, by the way, for 30 some years. I've seen lots of people die, in my lifetime, and it never, it never feels different on any given day, on any given situation, whether they're young or old or whoever it is,
Mhm.
right?
Hey, it's Marci from the Warrior Parent Podcast. I just wanted to share with you that we have some changes coming up. We are shifting from doing our podcast every Thursday, as we have for the past 2.5 years. We're moving as of February to a every other week format. And that's because we are working on our first book, which is a big lift and we love doing it, but we just have a limited amount of bandwidth and we are trying to take care of ourselves and our sanity. So you're going to see us every 2 weeks, every other Thursday for the Warrior Parent Podcast. and then stay tuned for our new book, which will be coming out sometime in the future. These are such challenging times. We're happy to share them with you, to walk through some of the things that you are walking through as a parent, as a human, as a woman, as a man, going through all of the things emotionally and sometimes physically, and just trying to walk with our heads held high, with our vision, our values at forefront, and staying awake and aware and doing what's ours to do. So keep joining us, and we look forward to talking with you and some of the fantastic guests that we have coming up. I will see you on the Warrior Parent Podcast.
But for me, like, it's the spiritual understanding that the soul has left, and it, you know, it's just the human suit, right? That's
Yes.
still there. So tell us about, like, this part now, like how you're moving forward. Talk about your grief and the processing, and all the things that you're doing so that other parents who have lost children can understand maybe how they might get through something like this.
So I'm a big proponent of therapy. I always have been. I believe we all go through kind of seasons of life where we just need a set of eyes outside of our own just to kind of give us a different viewpoint. And so right after everything had happened, I immediately went to start seeing my therapist again.
Mm.
And we'd been seeing each other weekly for probably about 2 months at this point. And it
Mm.
was one of those sessions that she looks at me and she goes, "Have you ever considered journaling?" And at the point, I kind of balked at the idea, and I went, "No, I've never really journaled." And she goes, "Well, have you ever would you consider it?" I said, the ironic answer was, "I don't know how good I am at writing. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's my thing." And so
Right.
she goes, "We'll put it on the back burner." She said, "It's kind of a mindfulness activity. It's just to get it off your chest." I said, "Okay." So I pushed it aside for 9 months. And as the story goes, I was on Facebook watching a reel, and I don't even remember what the reel was about, but something in that reel caught my attention, and it just immediately reminded me of my son, and like it hit me like a Mack truck. Like I was
Mm.
ugly crying, I like just in tears, just guttural, just inconsolable for a minute. And I finally regained composure and I opened up a Word document in proper letter writing form. Dear Zachary, and I just verbally vomited on a page. Like
Yes.
Mm.
this is how the
Let
day's
it
going.
all
This is how
go.
I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking since you've been gone. That kind of thing. And for whatever reason, I made a folder on my laptop and I saved it. I to this day I don't remember. I don't remember the reason why, because at the time I was just like, well, I'm never going to share this. But I,
Right.
I just threw them all in a folder for whatever reason. And throughout this, I got, like everybody does, I got on Facebook and found groups that dealt with grief and that kind of thing. And I got to know one of the admins really well of a smaller group. And I said, "Hey, do you mind if I share one of my journal entries?" And she was just like, "I would love for you to, because we rarely, if ever, get men willing to open up." And I said,
Mhm.
"Okay."
Hmm.
So I copied and pasted it. Now, right before I hit send, I went, "Am I in the mental space to be able to share this?" Because at that point, it was almost a year removed from my son passing away. And I went, as noble as this might be, it's still the internet. And if should
Right.
someone make a negative comment, am I going to be able to handle it? Like, not want to jump down their throat and pull them through the
Yes.
screen.
Yes.
Sure.
And so I thought about it for a minute, and kind of in my fashion, I just went, "Screw it, I'll do it anyway." And so I hit send and I didn't think much about it, went to work, that kind of thing. And later that evening, all of a sudden, I started getting notifications. And I literally looked at my wife and went, "Well, here it goes. Let's see what's happening." And literally the first comment was this woman that I've never met before. She goes, "We've never crossed paths. I've never explained exactly how I feel. I've never told anybody what's deep down inside." She said, "I just read your journal entry." And she goes, "You have hit the nail on the head." She's just like, "I feel every word of what you're saying in here." She said, "You could not
Mm.
have expressed how I feel any better." And I said,
Mhm.
"Well, I really appreciate it." I said, "It's inspired by my son." And I said, "This was just kind of my raw, in the moment feeling." And I said,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it." So
Yeah.
If I hadn't have gotten that comment, I probably wouldn't be talking to y'all today. But it
Yeah.
was because of that comment that every kind of the ball got in motion. And it was after I kept getting those comments, I kind of went, I've got something here and I want to build on this. What can I do with it? And that's where it kind of evolved into what I'm doing today.
I'd like to take just a minute and just honor you for sharing your story, first of all, because
Mm.
that's incredibly brave. And I know that there's someone listening to this who it's going to mean something to as well, just like that woman
Sure.
that you said. And there's a couple things that struck me about it. One is the you talked about how you were compartmentalized and
Mhm.
during the process you were doing exactly what you needed to do. And that makes such sense. And what a gift to your wife also that you were able to give her that guidance so that she could function until she
Mhm.
got to the place where then she could
Yes.
fall apart, because I'm sure
Mhm.
that's in the story. We didn't necessarily hear all of that other than we hear
Yeah.
the guttural scream, which is totally relatable.
Uh-huh.
But we need that place where we can get to, but you still have a life and you have another child who needs to be
Yes.
cared for and all the things. So that makes so much sense. And then also, I really want to honor, even with a year later, when you're choosing to share the letter, that you've started this journaling and found,
Mhm.
been open to this process and absolutely unedited, like you said, which is the way it works. If you edit it
Yes.
yourself, then it's not really journaling, then it's writing
Yeah.
for some other reason. But when you're just writing,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. But I love that you took a moment before you shared it and honored yourself again by saying, wait a minute, am I ready for this? Like, let me think about this. Let me, and
Mm.
then, you said, screw it. And that's fine too. Like you decided you were ready to handle that, but that's also not nothing. These are all very self-aware steps that you were taking. And I think it's really, it's kind of amazing and well
So,
done.
what's the feedback that you're getting from other men? Tell us about. I'm really curious
Well,
about men. You talk about grief from a man's perspective. Being a woman, I'd love to know what that is. How?
well, in the beginning, Letters to Zachary was specifically for men, but what I learned really quickly is even though men are a part of a lot of these Facebook groups and online groups, most of them are what I would call lurkers. They'll come into the group, they'll read
Mhm.
everything, they'll know what's in there, but are they active in like responding? No,
Right,
they're not.
right.
And so the other running joke is the reason why I created Letters to Zachary was out of spite. Just because of the fact I would go into all these groups, it would be 99% women, which there's nothing wrong with that. But in the
Hmm.
moment, I wanted it, even though I wasn't going to find a man exactly what I was dealing with, I wanted someone at least in the ballpark, and I could not find that. So I
Mm,
finally got to a point where it's just like, well, if I can't find it, I'm going to create it because
yeah.
it's got to be out there. And so that's where all of this came from. And then when I started finding out, well, like for example, the percentage of men I have following my Facebook page is three times the average of every Facebook group out there that deals with emotion.
Hmm.
But I still have the same amount of participation from the men in there. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of the frustration with it. Yeah, I'm a man. I'm showing to them it's okay to do that. But to get them to actually be active in it, that's still another ball game. But
Yeah.
I took a front door and a back door approach. And what I mean by that, the front door was trying to get to the men personally face to face with them. That has not worked. Then my other
Hmm.
approach was, well, if I can't get to those men, I'm going to try to get to their wives. And if their wives really like what I'm doing, then eventually through them, they're going to mention what I'm doing to them. And so I may not get in the front door, but I might get in the back door. And
Yeah.
Good job. Good
that's
job.
kind of the evolution of it is
Yeah.
to try to be able to get them a part of this group. And
Yeah.
so that has worked. What I try to tell women in this group, and again, probably 94% of my followers are women, like I even came up with, excuse me, I came up with a piece of content called the Male Grief Constitution. And I came
Mm.
up with 10 points of things I thought that I could tell women that may not get their man to open up per se right then and there, but it will at least set the stage to make it comfortable for them to want to
Wow.
open up. And
Right.
Wow.
so, like, for example, the first one I always say, and I always preface it because I have gotten some almost clapback from it, was I'll go, first of all, this is not a personal attack on you. Please do not take it that way. But one of the sentiments I get from a lot of men, I tell women, I say, if a man's willing to come to you with something important enough to talk about, especially emotions, you
Hmm.
have to listen and not listen to respond. And
Mhm.
I say, and there's a huge difference. And
Oh, yeah.
I go, here's what I mean by that. If I'm going to my wife explaining to her something that's bothering me, and she waits for the one moment I take a breath to be able to speak again, and then fills in that one spot with how my feelings are making her feel bad or whatever it's making her feel,
Yeah.
I said, yes, men are simple creatures and we'd like it that way, but what that subconsciously teaches us is our feelings don't matter as much as yours do. And then
Right.
that's a strike against you. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's a strike against you because that
Yeah.
Yeah.
subconsciously says, well, my feelings don't matter as much and it will always be you first. And
Yeah.
so, I tell them that and I go, a lot of things that men have to deal with, it's a generational thing, honestly. The younger generation these days are better than my generation, and it seems like
Yeah.
they get a little better and a little better.
Yeah.
I'll be 50 this year, so I'm Generation X, and so I jokingly say I'm the rub some dirt on it and walk it off generation. You know, I'm I
Yeah.
have been I have been taught all my life, sure, you can have emotions, but it's got to be short, it's got to be sweet. It
Yeah.
can be in the public, but they would prefer it being private.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I tell people all the time, I said, you know how a job gives you 3 bereavement days? Well, at least for my generation, that's the amount of time you have to grieve death, and then you go back to work
Yeah.
Yep.
is what it comes down to. And so
Yeah.
it's that's just a hurdle that a man has to overcome that
Yeah.
maybe a woman does not.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so,
Yeah.
I'm I'm
There's
a
more
boom
space.
yeah, I'm a boomer by the way. And
mhm,
you're even leveled up to where you are because for my generation it was like you're not having any
yeah,
feelings. Like
yep,
like nothing. You don't even get a little bit, not a window, not a
yeah,
nothing. We don't want to see it, you know, right?
yeah,
So as
Yeah.
you're saying, we're hopeful that every generation with men, especially getting a little bit better
mhm,
and allowing these things to process, right?
sure,
I love that you share that about the Constitution, as you call it, and that first item, listening to hear, listening, rather than just
mm,
to respond. Brene Brown talks about, because she's talking about vulnerability and she's talking
mhm,
about shame, and she shares a story of a man who came up after one of her talks and basically said, you want men to be open, you're saying you want men to be willing to be vulnerable and talk about things, and yet so often men feel this pressure from women
mhm,
to be strong, to be so, like, on one hand we're saying open up, be emotional, but if we don't create space to allow that, and especially in hard things, but
mhm,
anywhere, allow that to happen without then being like, okay, that's enough now. Now you need to get back up and be the strong
mhm,
guy or whatever, or lead the family. Then it's disingenuous. And it's so important to have that space to be able to.
mhm,
I mean, you're talking about what I believe is probably the hardest thing that can come to you in life, the loss of a child. I don't know what
mhm,
could compare to that. So if a man doesn't have a place to process that one, like, that's, you need a big space for that. But
sure,
all men have other things too, just men who don't have to deal, and women who don't have to deal with that particular hardest thing in the
mm,
world. We all still have stuff, and we need
mhm,
to have that space to show up in our emotional self. And
mhm.
so that's great that you're kind of sharing that, and because sometimes we do need someone to tell us, make sure you make that space.
Yeah.
Well, and the analogy that I typically will give men, and I try to come up with something that most men will understand. And the men I've talked to, I've go, look, let's pretend you're on whatever your emotional highway is. You're driving your car down the road, and all of a sudden your check engine light comes on. I said, you have a decision to make at that point. I said, you can pull off the side of the road to a mechanic to see what it is, and it may be something simple, and you fix it right then and there, and the issues are corrected. I said, or you can decide to ignore it and keep doing it, and later on, somewhere down the road, it becomes a major issue
Yep.
to
Yeah.
be able to fix, and it tear not only does it tear up what the initial cause was, it tears up other things
Yeah.
along with it. I said, so it's your decision to decide what you want to do with that check engine light. I said, your
Mm.
emotions are the same way. I said,
Mm.
sure, you can push them down all you want. I said, but your
Yeah.
body's got a weird way of remembering, and it will come out at the most inopportune time possible that you can think of. And
Yeah.
I felt like I'm doing this somewhat. I don't want to say I'm always correct, but somewhat a little more on the right path. And I still have moments where, in the most
Of course.
inopportune moment, I have moments where grief just comes out where I'm just like, why am
Yeah.
I doing this at this moment?
Yeah. Grief
Yeah.
is not linear, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just comes in these giant
It comes
waves.
and
You never
comes.
know, when it's going to come and when it's going to hit.
I
Um,
love that analogy, though. That is a
yes.
Mm,
fantastic
mm,
analogy and brilliant
mm,
Yeah.
for men
Yeah.
because
mm.
most of them, well, everybody should really understand that
Yeah.
you can ignore that. You can ignore that light. You ignore it at your own peril because
Yep.
Yeah.
it's not just a pretty light. It's telling you
Yep.
something, and it will come back in another a
Yep.
bigger way
Yep.
at an inopportune moment, as you put it.
Mm,
Yeah.
So I think the three things, you shared are super helpful. So,
mm,
number one is the journaling. Marcy and I use journaling a lot with our
mm.
kids and everybody we talk to. In fact, we're writing a book pretty soon, and that's going to be
Awesome.
part of the book. You talked
Great
about
tool.
you've talked about your community that you've created, right? Which is
Mm,
where
Mm,
I'm sure a lot of your healing comes through, right? And I think that's a
mm,
big one for men too. I think typically men really probably would rather isolate than just stuff it down,
mm.
which is the worst thing that you can do.
Certainly.
So kudos to you for being brave and showing up and actually creating a space for a bunch of other men. Um, I'm afraid we're out of time. I could talk to you all day, Jason, and maybe
Well,
we'll
thank
have
you.
you back and you can
Okay.
have share some more insights about how your journey continues, because I'm sure
Sure.
um, it's going to go on and on and on, right?
As I tell people all the time, it's a lot, despite what society tells you, it's a lifelong process.
it sure is.
Don't we
How's
know?
your daughter, by the way,
Yes.
doing these days?
She's better because she's got the developmental delays and being nonverbal. You know, initially she was confused just because
Mm,
even though she couldn't say it, she always knew that I took my son to the hospital, I stayed with him, I came home with him.
yeah.
The day that he passed, she got sent off to school. So she came home and her brother was not home, but yet I was. And
Yeah.
so I could see almost the wheel, but she couldn't figure out what it was. And for the longest time, I felt like she was either angry or blamed me for the fact that her
Mm,
brother, which I mean, I don't fault her. That was just how she dealt with it.
Hmm.
I took him, I brought him home. Why didn't I bring him home?
yeah.
And there were many times in that first 6 months to a year, I'd look at her and go, girl, if Daddy could have brought your brother home, Daddy would have brought your brother home, but Daddy didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And so now she's better. Um, I don't see the anger as much as I used to, although
Mm,
there are moments where I think that it's kind of grief coming up, but it's not near as frequent as it used to be.
Yeah.
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 She gets the space to deal with that too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can people find you if they want to, if they're dealing with grief, if they're more interested in Letters to Zachary or whatever else you're doing out there in the world?
Well, they can go to my website, which is letterstozachary.com.
Mhm.
On there, you can scroll down to the bottom, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Lemonade, and LinkedIn. So
All the places.
I'm on a majority of them. Um, on my website, if you're someone that is early on in your journey, I literally have every entry for the first full year of grief on my website that people can read.
Mm.
They can read in progression. It should they, to kind of see what my progression was through that first full year of just dealing with grief and everything associated with it. Um, those are my main areas. I am published. I do have a grief coloring book that they can
Ah,
look at on Amazon.
ah,
Um, that was done as kind of a way to give back to the grief community because
mm.
in getting everything up, I had so many people help me that I wanted a way to allow them to kind of have their voice as well. So the coloring book is basically every entry in there is a person I have personally come across that has lost a loved one, whether a child or an adult. And it's a full coloring book page on the front side of it. And on the back, it's got who they are, where they're from, and just some positive attributes about that person that was in their lives, is what the coloring book is. And it's meant to be almost a mindfulness activity, just kind of be able to
Yeah.
get grief off and to let people understand that, there are people exactly like them that have lost like them.
Yeah, what a beautiful tribute. What is the coloring book called?
Same thing, letters to Zachary.
Letters to Zachary. Okay. Wow.
Uh, if people are interested, I think it's like the third section down. There's a button you can click. It'll take you right to it.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you
Awesome.
so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sending so much love to you and your sweet family, your daughter, your wife. Just knowing lots of good stuff for you all in the future.
Well, thank you so much. I really
Mhm.
appreciate being on.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters.
Today we're going to journal, and here is your journaling prompt. If I could go anywhere in the world, I would go. Take a few moments, journal about where you would go, feel it, create it. Really think about what would serve you and uplift you. If I could go anywhere in the world, I would go. Enjoy your journaling.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.